Rennie Good was a gifted soul, a writer and a poet and a mother, wow. She tried to hit an agent with her car, oh no! Pop, motherfucker, now she's gone! Yeah! Being a fucking liberal is a mental disease. Blue-haired and fuckables with the septum ring. You are not a hero, you're a fucking disease! You fuck around and find out it's what it is! Homo started talking shit to protect a chomo. He was getting nicked when he pulled a gun. Bam, motherfucker, now you're gone. Yeah. Being a fucking liberal is a mental disease. Blue-haired and fuckables with the septum ring. You are not a hero, you're a fucking disease. Fuck around and find out what that is.
Not fixing 2020 will damn our nation forever. The historic Maricopa County full forensic audit effort processed 20,895,610 digital and forensic images of varying formats, resulted in 208 million individual evidence-proof files. The system processed over 58 billion forensic measurements, resulting in over 2 trillion individual base computations. No hopium, no hype, just hardcore forensic evidence. Please make sure the Maricopa County Full Forensic Audit Archives survive. Donate now. So if you want what happened in the 2020 election fixed, then please donate to protect and secure this historic evidence. We can't do it without you. We need you. America needs you. Our future needs you. Please donate now.
Hey guys, welcome to the program. Welcome to the crap. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about crap. Big crap. Widespread crap. Culture, race, and American politics. Hey folks, do me a finger, would you please? Will you please share, like, and follow? Lift a finger, share this program, get it out there. We're going to take a look at something incredibly interesting. This is a what-if exercise. But when somebody kind of stimulated my thinking, I thought, you know what? Wow, that kind of makes sense. Today's program is brought to you by the fine folks at Goldco. Here's what I'm asking you to do. Just go to jovanlovesgold.com. Yep. Request your free gold and silver kit today. Now is the time to protect your money with gold and silver. Something's coming, and after this program, you might be a little bit more convinced. Please, with my fine partners at Goldco, go to jovanlovesgold.com, fill out the form, get the information, feed your brain. Okay. This topic is rather hard-hitting, and it's hard-hitting because you might not have connected these things together before. But I got a question for you. What if it was all a plan to change everything? Even bigger than you thought. Take a moment to ponder that. Got about a minute and a half. Share this with friends. This one might blow your socks off. We'll get started right after this.
Warning. The following program has been rated Dilligaff and is intended for open-minded audiences. If the truth offends you, or if you are allergic to focused intensity, intellectual athleticism, or the occasional F-bomb or even irreverent humor, please switch off now. If your delicate sensibilities need to be worried about or addressed, might we recommend the Underwater Basket Weaving channel to you? Otherwise, sit back, enjoy the wisdom, insight, and wicked sense of humor.
Cut the crap. How many times a day do you want to say that to politicians, the elite, the loony liberals, the fake news media, and the gender-confused, emotional socialist snowflake crowd. Cut the Crap is your secret weapon for fighting for our freedoms and our great republic. It all begins with a massive mental enema, freeing you from the toxic news and politically correct views, which constipate your consciousness with stinking thinking. Your host, Jovan Hutton Pulitzer. He's known for calling out politicians and telling them to cut the crap. You've seen him on virtually every television network and listened to him on Coast to Coast Radio. And now he's here to help you learn to fight for America. Culture, race, and American politics. They all have one thing in common. They all need to cut the crap. Now, here's your host, Jovan Hutton Pulitzer.
Okay, guys, get ready for a wild ride. Here's the question. What if it was all a plan to change everything? You'll have context in a minute, but what if it was all a plan? I'm talking everything. What if everything was a plan? First, we're going to start with a few little pop quiz questions. Put your answer in chat. If the grand powers that be in this world we live in, controlling the money, controlling everything, had their druthers, would they exterminate a lot of us? Simple question. If they had their way, would they, and right now it doesn't matter whose plan it is, would they exterminate us? Would they get rid of us? Meaning, if we had a big, badass, grand cabal, everything, would they get rid of us? Some of you agree they've already tried. But would they? If they could just lop off, we've heard it before, if they could lop off a few billion of us, would they do it? If they could get away with it, right? You've heard the thing, there's supposed to be 500 million of us remaining from their grand plan. Now, let me ask you a question. Is the opposite of what we just discussed that they'd get rid of as many of us as they could? Is the opposite of that they would truly want to save us? Of course, the opposite of that is they truly want to save us. Next, do you think that the ultra high net worth people, we're talking the mega rich, that have worked in the system to date, we'll say the Rockefellers, whatever the case may be, you insert any one, would you agree that they really don't want brand new people coming into the system, let's say like an Elon Musk, and becoming a trillionaire? They don't want new members to the mega billions and trillionaire club, because when you've got money, you can change things. So would you agree they want to limit that? You might not have thought about that before, right? But if we were to think about it in the terms of deep state or very liberal, they certainly don't want conservative people to raise to mega wealth, do they? No, hell no. It'll rain on their parade. You're right. So one way to keep control is to control opportunity. Would you agree? If you control opportunity, right, you control everything. It's like if I'm speaking to high school or college students and I can say something like, the United States of America is the greatest country in the world to be born in and grow in. Invariably, you'll hear some boos and moans because they think they're being politically correct. And I'll go, oh, okay, I heard that. So let me tell you a story. Let me tell you a story about the very wealthy Mark Zuckerberg of Venezuela. Have you ever heard the story? Raise your hand if you've heard the story of the Mark Zuckerberg type, just so you have an analogy, because you won't know his name, that rose to incredible wealth in Venezuela. Nobody will raise their hand. And I'll say, because there isn't one. You can't do that in that country. It's not how it works. And then, of course, they get the moral of the story. And so if we believe they want to control the money and they want to control the systems, do you also agree that they need us? They may want to kill us, but what goes hand in hand with controlling the money is they need people to do their dirty work and to do their crap. Some people in LA, don't deport the illegals. Nobody will do my yard. Well, if all of us were gone, who'd make their money for them? See, so it's kind of a fine thing. You hear things like they want to reduce the population to 500 million. But if that person's only worth $1 a year to you, it's not very much money. So we got to be the producers. We got to be the slaves. So I want to look at this through a little bit of a different filter where I'm going to combine what's going on now, something we have not talked about, with what's happened in the past. And I'm going to ask you a question. What if it was all a plan to change everything? And we have to begin on a historic journey to begin with, because everything they do and they have done at different times in history. That's how they learned it. That's why one of the things is never let a good crisis go to waste. That's where that comes from. History is the greatest teacher, period. It's why they erase history. It's why they don't want you reading and writing cursive for your grandbabies and your kids and stuff, because you can't read the original founding documents. So there is a big, grand, sinister plan. Now, with that question, here it is. I'm going to put it to you as a question. Put it in chat. Do you think there is a big, grand, sinister plan? I'm talking on the scale of the globe. And I admit, I've told you this before. I never thought that was possible because I don't think people can work well enough together. I just never thought that was possible. But I was wrong. Do you think there is a grand plan to control everything on a global basis? To decide what we eat, where we go, what we have, what we own, what we don't own, what they get to have versus what we get to have? I think, yeah, it's worldwide. I think the answer everybody knows is yes. Okay. With that, I want you to stay with me, and I want you to take a what if journey with me. What if? What if it really is a plan? And what I want to do is I want to go back to just as we're into the 1900s, as we get into the 20th century. And I want to go back and I want to start here. Now, this might look familiar to you, but it's actually, a 1917, 1918 photo, even though she's wearing a little sign that says wear a mask or go to jail. What? Yeah, she's wearing a sign that says wear a mask or go to jail. In fact, it was all over the news, San Francisco. An ordinance compelling the wearer of gauze mask by every person in San Francisco as a means of preventing the spread of the influenza epidemic was passed by the Board of Supervisors at the request of the Board of Health. Penalties for violation are fines ranging from $5 to $10 or 10 days imprisonment or both. The ordinance is immediately effective. Masks may be discarded only in homes or during meal times. The total number of cases of Spanish influenza in California passed 50,000 today. Kind of sounds familiar, doesn't it? Can you agree that sounds familiar? So to bring you up to date on history, I'm going to give you a little bit of history to watch, and it's the retelling just to get you up to speed on what I'm about to talk about. We're going to come right on into modern day of what happened during, oh no, did they say Spanish flu? Didn't President Trump say China flu? Oh my God, how racist. Okay, here we go.
This is the history of the 1918 flu pandemic in 7 minutes. Ready? Go. Countries all over the world crippled by an invisible enemy. Economies devastated. Millions dead, even more sick. The year? 1918. And a virus just sparked one of the deadliest pandemics in recorded history. At the time, the 1918 flu pandemic was often referred to as the Spanish flu. But it actually isn't Spanish at all. There are several origin theories, but the only consensus is it definitely didn't start in Spain. The flu was identified in early 1918 at a military camp in Kansas, where 48 soldiers died. So by one theory, the so-called Spanish flu could actually be American, or it could be French. Some believe the flu started in the trenches of World War I in Étaples, France, or possibly even Aldershot, UK. A third theory traces the origin to an outbreak of a respiratory disease in China's Shanxi province the year prior. Historian Mark Humphreys found records showing a group of Chinese laborers mobilized to work on the Western Front, 3,000 of whom ended up quarantined with flu-like symptoms. So why did people start calling it the Spanish flu if it was American, French, or Chinese in origin? The pandemic hit in the latter part of World War I, and Allied censors downplayed the spread of the virus to avoid lowering morale. Since Spain was neutral, it more accurately reported the flu's spread. The Spanish king also fell gravely ill with the virus, getting headlines outside of Spain. Together, this gave the false impression Spain was more affected by the virus. So why was this particular strain so deadly? It started like all influenza, a virus transmitted person to person via airborne respiratory droplets, like coughs or sneezes. The 1918 flu became an outbreak because it was a new strain, and people had no immunity to it. This new strain appeared after an H1N1 virus that likely originated in birds made the jump to humans. But why did it affect so many healthy young people? Modern scientists have reconstructed the strain, finding it caused a cytokine storm, or an extreme overreaction in the immune system. Essentially, the virus used your own defense system against you, causing inflammation in the lungs and fluid accumulation, and sometimes setting off deadly secondary infections. The body's reaction could be so severe that the victim could drown in their own body fluids within mere hours. In the early 20th century, we were ill-prepared for a flu pandemic. First, we had no flu vaccines, no antibiotics to treat secondary infections like pneumonia, and penicillin was still 10 years away from being invented. Second, the flu hit during war. In the U.S., thousands of men fell ill while in the process of being deployed across the Atlantic to fight. Once at the war front, several conditions helped spread the virus. Undernourished soldiers lacked sufficient vitamin B, causing more deaths, and horrible hygiene conditions in the trenches escalated the spread, a sign of what was to come for cities with dense populations living in close quarters. Third, without any pharmaceutical treatments, governments were left with few weapons to combat the virus. Isolation and disinfectants were their best tools. Unfortunately, control efforts were also localized and applied unevenly. In the U.S., there was an absence of steady government leadership on the federal level, and not every city acted swiftly, and there were repercussions. After Philadelphia detected their first case, officials launched a campaign to deter people from coughing, spitting, and sneezing in public. However, about a week later, they still held a citywide parade that over 200,000 people attended. Flu cases quickly rose to 20,000, forcing the city to finally shut down public gathering spaces, including theaters and churches. In contrast to Philadelphia, St. Louis mandated all people experiencing symptoms quarantine in their homes just 2 days after the city's first case was discovered. As a result, during the deadliest initial 6-month period, the death rate in St. Louis was less than half of Philadelphia's death rate. Fortunately, many cities were like St. Louis, and lives were saved due to drastic measures. Other cities like San Francisco, Milwaukee, Kansas City, New York responded quickly and effectively with interventions like mandatory quarantines and staggered business hours, which cut the spread by rates of 30 to 50%. Social distancing wasn't in their terminology, but that's largely what they were doing. In the United States, many cities closed theaters, movie houses, schools, and prohibited public gatherings. San Francisco required any person serving the public to wear a mask and recommended residents to wear a mask when in public. Salt Lake City marked 2,000 flu-infested homes with quarantine signs, and in Arizona, $10 fines were given to those who were seen not wearing the proper protective gear in public. But the pandemic spread benefited from misinformation and a lack of fact-checking. Snake oil salesmen had a field day. Dr. Franklin Dwayne ran advertisements about a fake home remedy called Dr. Pierce's Pleasant Pellets. Other fake remedies included Dr. Bell's Pine Tar Honey, Shank's Mandrake Pills, and the aptly named Miller's Antiseptic Snake Oil. Vicks VapoRub also advertised itself as a remedy for the flu, claiming to stimulate the mucous membrane to throw off the germs. In reality, the most effective preventative routine wasn't downing tar honey or snake oil. It was early government intervention by simultaneously closing a city's public spaces, including schools and churches. Studies show that method had the potential to cut city death rates in half. But with some cities' slower or more lenient responses, the death rates skyrocketed. In October alone, the virus killed an estimated 195,000 Americans. Compare that to 116,000, the number of American soldiers who died throughout all of World War I. War efforts also complicated the outbreak by creating a shortage of physicians, as many had been drafted for the war effort. The Red Cross had to recruit more volunteers, and medical students were assigned jobs as interns or nurses. On the other side of the war, Germans were also struggling. That same month, October 1918, German civilians were hit particularly hard by the pandemic. Researcher Andrew Price Smith notes that the flu significantly hindered the ability of the German workforce to support the war effort, potentially helping end German military efforts. The next month, the war was declared over. Cities like San Francisco, believing the virus was safely contained after the initial wave, lifted their restrictions. Americans celebrated and soldiers returned home, contributing to yet another resurgence of the flu. In San Francisco, 1,800 flu cases and 101 deaths were reported in the first 5 days of January. Cities that had kept interventions in place never experienced another wave of high mortality rates. How did the 1918 flu pandemic end? In the U.S., fatal cases continued through the spring of 1919, and then herd immunity weakened the virus's stronghold. And according to historian John Barry, the virus itself eventually weakened, likely mutating into a less lethal strain. All told,
Okay, so it mutated. 50 to 100 million people died. Now, what you might find very interesting about that bit of history is, if you go back and look at the data and the origins, it looked like somehow it started with the first really known isolated cases. Really wasn't on the battlefield. It was at a military base in the United States of America. And then the big bop, ironically, was in China. Then it kind of made its way to the war. Then it spread to the countries. And then the soldiers brought it back and spread it across the world. Now, number one, I find that incredibly interesting. Incredibly interesting. First off, what do you know, right? What do you know about the first big, Wall Street stock market crash? Put it in chat real quick. What do you think you know about it? So that kind of sets up pandemic, scale, travel, etc. Now remember, if you can isolate any infection, disease, or whatever, as man, if you can isolate it, you can travel it and put it anywhere you want. You do understand that. One of the single most hidden pieces of history, and I'm going to share this with you, only because I've read the documents myself. One of the single, and here's why it's hidden from history. One of the single largest death by pandemics happened well over 1,000 years ago here in the United States. And a lot of people don't know that. The reason it doesn't get talked about is that because it was the Chinese exploring the world. Can't say the Chinese discovered America, can you? Although you do see their genetics in almost all American Indian tribes. Anyway, a lot of this history was destroyed. And if you were to look at the Tangs, which basically is dragons, and you were looking and you can see them, they're either two-toed dragons, three-toed dragons, or four-toed dragons, how they're carved and painted. That tells you about who was ruling at the time. Well, in the United States of America, on one of our greatest rivers in a rock face is a gigantic carved three-toed dragon, which goes back to this ancient Chinese dynasty. The United States of America had it obliterated from the cliff. So there was no signs of it being here because it should not be in the United States of America. Now, the reason the world doesn't talk about it is because the young, we'll just call him a prince, the young prince that was exploring the world to find his fortune and prove his mettle, should we say, as being the future ruler, set out for exploration for his family. He brought with him, ironically, smallpox. And as they were coming across the Americas and they encountered vast civilizations of, I guess you would call them now Mesoamericans, but they were actually Native Americans, right? From that time period. What he did is they took captives, they infected them with smallpox, and they sent them back to the tribes. And it wiped out millions. It wiped out most of the civilization that was in the Americas. That's why we have this weird gap in our history. How was the United States of America, North America, so empty? See, nobody ever asked that question because they talk about coming here and there were native tribes, but there weren't vast civilizations. Why was that? And that's why it was basically a country that could be, taken over and made. Well, they spread smallpox and they wiped out 100, 150, 200 million Americans. Now, when the news got back to the Orient that this young prince did it, his father rightly became enraged and said, that is not exploration. That's not how you treat other people. That's not how you conquer other people. We're traitors. And he basically banished his son. They erased all his history, and only one unique document, which I have read, exists from that time period telling the story of what happened. Now, the reason I tell you this is there has forever been the ability to weaponize disease. You don't hear that story because the Asian side of the equation don't want to be, hey, we went in and we killed 150 or 200 million people. And the quote unquote, the American manifest destiny side doesn't want to say, well, China came here first. Which is why Eskimos, a lot of South Americans, a lot of Native Americans have the Asiatic genes. And look, now does it kind of all make sense to you? Anyway. So we know that pandemics, and have known for a very long time, it can be devastating to a population. So when it comes to the market crash, what do you know about the big stock market crash? Anything? And by the way, one day I'll pull out those records and I'll give you the whole story, when, what, where, whatever. And I'll even send you to the rock face where you can go see tiny glimpses of where the United States of America obliterated this massive dragon that was carved in the rock face. Massive. Okay. Most people don't know a lot about our stock market crash. When did the stock market crash occur? Okay. Well, you see, and you're saying, Ann, it's China doing it every time. See, what I just told you here is China did it here, but they didn't sanction it. Spanish flu was quite possibly done here and taken there. Then it got to the troops, and then it spread worldwide. Don't just blame it on the Chinese. Okay, so you're talking about 1929 and late history. So let me tell you about the stock market crash, okay? Most people don't know this. all of the security prices dropped almost instantly, 25%. In fact, it wiped out a very large section of the investors. And it ultimately ended to the benefit of other investors who came in and bought it up. You know that happens, right? Well, that's how the stock market crashed in 1792. What? You thought I was talking about 1929, 1930? No, you're way behind. In 1792, we had our very first Wall Street crash panic. Now, what was going on at the time, that was when we had, 1792. I know you're going, what the fuck? That's history's everything, folks. And so we did have these financial markets in 1792. And it was devastating. And what happened is, even though it crashed a lot of people, right? It had to do when America's really dealing in two things: large speculation, we'll call that entrepreneuring. You had old money. Remember, you had old world money. You've heard that term before, old world money. Keep that in mind. You had a lot of speculation in this new thing, the Americas, and you had a lot of things going for the first time at credit, right? And so that's what precipitated that crash in 1792. Now let's go forward. The next crash. Oh yeah, there was the next crash. Not 1930. I'm not there yet. That crash was in 1873. Again, you don't hear about this one. And it was in 1873 when big families were putting in railroads across the country. Funny, you never hear about the big families. Well, see, to do the railroads, they too sold stock, 1873. Yeah. And all of a sudden we get this weird crash. It was a financial panic, specifically about railroads and credit. Will the bills be paid? Now, remember, you hark back to time, everybody's worried about bills being paid. So there was this panic spread by the media. What? Rich people owned the media. They were doing the railroads. They sold a shitload of stock. They could weather it out. Other people couldn't. Are you getting the gist? Now we're getting to a second wealth transfer. See, a lot of this was nation wealth transfer at different times, conquering nations. But when you got a free nation, you got to do it differently. So it was in 1873 when we had the second, should we call it, mega wealth transfer. Again, it's speculation. This speculation is specifically railroad. All the big names you hear about were in, but don't think they were just dropping checks. They were leading the charge. And in leading that charge, somehow the newspapers started talking about, oh crap, the bills aren't going to be paid. It led to speculation. The market panicked. And in the market panic, okay, it created nationwide and global panic. And a lot of people started selling, trying to cut their losses so they could get out. That was the panic of 1873. Ironically, you still had people up here at the top of the pyramid who could always weather it out. Okay? Our next one. I'm still not to 1929 and 30 yet. Our next one is called the Panic of 1907. And in 1907, America is basically kicking ass, right? I mean, it's just freaking kicking ass. We are the entrepreneurs of the world. We're the innovators of the world. We're the new type of exploration of the world. We're opening all kinds of markets. You know, we had the whaling market. We had cattle. We had all this stuff. It was going, just boom. Now, this one was caused by what was legitly, because there were so many things involved in the markets now, a legit plunge that might not have been controlled, but the plunge scared people. But this time it didn't just scare the public, it scared the banks. The banks got scared, and all of a sudden, the market crashes. Well, we build back up from 1907 to 1929. You might notice really interesting sub 20-year increments between all of these. Have you picked it up yet? Then we get to 1929. Now, this is what you know when you typically are taught or talk about stock market crashes. It's what created the Great Depression. It is during that 1907 window, we got another crash, and the government comes in and says, we don't want to let good people lose their money anymore. What was their answer to that? Well, you probably know it as the little bitty thing that they started ruminating, practicing, figuring out how to do, known as the Federal Reserve. That was going to come in and rescue you. The Federal Reserve. So it gets up and running, and then we get legitly into the 1929 crash known as Black Monday or Black Tuesday, although that's racist. Those are our crashes. Now, the single largest transfer of public wealth, you got to remember, where was the money in our country to begin with? Do you know what made our country so rich? We could do one thing that all other countries in the world could not do. You're right. Who said that? Sunshine in Texas? The gold rush. So you got to understand, in other countries, the countries or the crown still own the minerals. You also understand, you don't understand like the Duke or Duchess of Sussex. You got to look at Sussex as a large area, and it has tens and thousands of plots of land. Well, the crown still owes it. You might live there. Hell, your family might have lived there for 100 years, but it's never yours. You just have a continual payment every month to keep it. Most people don't even know that. Most people have no idea. You can even look in Hong Kong. You can buy a place. You technically only lease it for 99 years. It may go on to your family, but it's not an asset that's technically yours. Oh, right, that was the crown as well. You have to understand that. So something really radical happened in the United States of America. See, back then, you owned nothing. They understood perfecting the system of servitude and serfdom, even to the land. And they openly tell us, you'll own nothing and be happy. One model broke it all, broke every one of those. And that was the United States of America. Because three things happened. No class, not that we didn't have any class, there were no classes. Number two, our gold rush. If in fact you wanted to go out and pan for gold, 8 to 80, crippled, blind, or crazy, didn't matter. You can get out there, you can pan for gold, and what you found was yours. And then a very novel idea. The land is yours. You go out there, think Yellowstone. You go out there, you put your little stakes down. If you watch 1923 of how Yellowstone became Yellowstone in the series, great series, but that's what it was. So a really interesting thing happened only in the United States of America. It's yours. And that wealth in the ground is not owned by the crown, it's yours. So you got to understand, in the very short windows I told you about there, we had our gold rush. So you had old family money, and then all of a sudden you had people, regular people, 8 to 80 crippled, blind, and crazy, ugly, one stumper, one leg, you name it, didn't matter, that instantly became mega millionaires. Well, the system couldn't have that. But they couldn't undo a lot of stuff that had been done. Now, of course, America exploded. It was the gold rush that built our nation. Period. What expanded our nation, ironically, was the Pony Express paving the way for the railroads. So when you look at the uniqueness of the United States of America, it basically went out. You know, if you found $10 million laying there on the ground at that time, which would be billions and billions today, and you picked it up and you carted it in and you traded it, it was yours, baby. By the way, did you know that law is still on the books? MA 1872, which basically means in the United States of America, you still have the total right to go out and claim 20 acres of land from the government as long as you work it as a mining claim. It's called the prudent man test. So you decide how much effort you want to put into it, right? And you can do it. And by the way, you might think that the land is already staked. Not true. There are millions and millions of acres. My family is one of these groups. I, as an individual, one of these groups that use that MA 1872 and put together plots of lands all over the country and do it. Let me tell you how this works. Have you ever wondered why you can have a national park that, let's say, is 20,000 acres or 50,000 acres, but all of a sudden you find this little bitty village in the middle of it, 500, 600, 700 acres, 1,000 acres, and somebody owns it? You ever wonder how they owned a national park? Well, it's because if you have the mining claim on it, that's the difference between patented land and unpatented land. If you have the mining claim on it and the government needs money, they have the power to say, hey, you're the mining claimant. Would you like to own this land? Now, since you staked it, you pay a fee for that. But since you staked it and you're working it, the government has the right to sell you that acreage. Like, you might be in the middle of Yellowstone and one of those come about. They haven't done it in decades and decades and decades, but it could happen. All you got to do is pay the fee, $5 an acre. Still the same to this day. Something bad governments, I've learned this firsthand, having a fight over claims with the government and bad administrations, they're trying to get rid of this. But in America, you can still do it. It's one of the only places you can do it. As you know these little tidbits, you understand what we really have. When it comes to mining claims, if you look at the claim standpoint, we own land in 13 states. It's not hard to do. And I've promised you, I'll do a program. I'll teach you how to do it yourself if you want to do it. But if you want to go out and work your ass off and do it, and if you stumble across a vein of platinum, it's yours. It's yours. And by the way, there's still great money out there. I know of a little bitty beach up in British Columbia where the Russians came in and they were mining for gold. And think of orcas going past the island, right? It's very remote. And they were mining in the sand and they're picking up rocks and they thought they'd found silver. They were not interested in silver, but they just kind of set it aside. This is all you get. This is why you have to understand records and ancient history. And they said, to hell with it, we're moving on. Well, I know where those records are. And those little bitty nuggets, they pick it up. In fact, horribly, was not silver. That's true. It was just platinum. And platinum had no value then. It's all still out there, folks. Of course, the government's not going to promote it, but you can. Gemstones, gold, silver, you name it. Anyway, I digress. I need you to understand that. You can set up a camp. You can get a permit to work it with an appropriate mining work, but you can't technically live there full time. but you can live there at periods. And yes, all of that can be done. Anyway, that's our country. Now, with those perspectives, can you understand why powers that be freaking hate the United States of America? Like if you're in Brazil and you're mining gemstones, which are all over, you find it, you got to report it to government. Yeah, you'll get paid for it, pittance. But if you don't report it, you're a criminal. The United States of America is the only country that has those laws in place. And by the way, when you find it, you only have to pay tax on it when you monetize it. You can find it and collect it, right? But when you monetize it, that's when you have to pay your tax. Or if it's gemstones, little loophole, when you get them appraised. Okay. So now we've been through market crashes, reverses of wealth, right? I've told you about the market crashes. Interestingly, almost every one of these occur in interesting 15, sub 20-year windows. And it seems to almost always be at a time, right, when American individuals are really, really, really getting wealthy. Now I'm going to go back to the Spanish flu. I'm telling you, the systems, the power at be, just like, and that's why I told you the stock market crashes story, so you can see them. They actually learn to use that in their favor. See, the one thing they can do is hold out. You bet your life savings in something. If something goes down, you're screwed, right? It's screwed the pooch. You can't ride it out. But the system is built with ultra high net worth individuals, mega wealth, of being able to ride the disasters out. And that's why I told you in this game about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, that's why Larry Flint, or Flynn, Fink at BlackRock can call Doug, CEO at Walmart, and say, you're going to put a black woman on your board and she must have a dick. You must call her a woman and everybody must use pronouns. Well, if Doug was ever to say, screw you, they say, well, we own all this, a retirement. We give everybody Walmart stock in our retirement accounts. We control 20 million retirement accounts. We'll just say we're no longer putting Walmart stock in the retirement accounts. Now, nothing happened. But just that announcement would crater the market and would drop Walmart stock. It would fall like a hammer. If you had somebody like BlackRock or those guys saying, we're no longer carrying Walmart as one of our stable stocks for our retirees, because it's very consistent. All they have to do is make that announcement. It'd crater the stock. Now, these guys, Fink at BlackRock knows he's got the CEO by the short hairs. Doug has to make a kind of a come to Jesus meeting, and they say, Doug, you get $30 million a year. You yourself have $100 million worth of stock. You're going to do this. And if you don't, you're going to get your ass fired. And by the way, we don't give a shit if you don't do it, because your stock's going to drop 50%, and we're just going to come back and buy fucking more. That's how it works. That is how the system works. And that's how they move people in masses and move these things in masses. And it's how we got DEI. And it's how it became an institutionalized thing, which, by the way, the person that empowered Mr. Fink to do that was Obama. Okay. So now you understand that this money push and pull can create institutions within inside the companies, et cetera, can make major changes. Well, if you look at the countries that have fallen to socialism that went communist, almost all of them are preceded by a pandemic. Almost every one of them throughout history are uniquely preceded by a pandemic. So if you look at how money can be manipulated historically, You can see how those who have the weather to ride it out, yeah, they lose too, but it's only for a short term because the stock comes back up. When they start buying it, it'll come back up to its level. That's how the game works. They can ride it out, regular guys can't. But the system learned that you can usher in big things if there is a pandemic involved. You can vacate a country, a nation, like what happened here in the United States of America and South America. You can vacate a nations of people. That's why we have vast mound civilizations, both in Mexico, both in the Ohio Valley in the United States, and we have all this stuff. And they basically say the people ran out of food and they moved on. No, they didn't. They got obliterated by pandemics, which some of them were plandemics. They got obliterated. People moved in. That's how you empty a country too. Learn your history. Okay. Now, when we look at this Spanish flu in 1918 and we look at people dropping left and right, we've got to look at what was the cause and effect. What did we get as a net effect of Spanish flu? Things that we didn't have before. Put it in chat. What happened as a result of the Spanish flu? Exactly what happened? Well, as a result of the Spanish flu, a few things interesting in American society happened. We began to track illnesses. We began to track deaths. We institutionalized most across the nation standardization of IDs, standardization of where are you from? You're from where? Let me see your ID. All of that came from our nation getting hit by the Spanish flu. Now, from an institutional standpoint, we lost about $680 billion of economic value. With mandatory disease reporting came mandatory carry your ID so we know who you are, so we can report. What really kind of busted open at that time? It was the seed that became something else. Well, that seed was the Center for Disease Control. Okay? And that's where it ultimately became, we get to the pandemic, we're working through it, we're trying to recover, everything's broken, that they began to institutionalize what they called the state national morbidity rates and reporting. At the same time, it gave governments, our government, the power to hunt you down. That was the U.S. Public Health Service. So now it empowered our government in the name of health to not only hunt you down, but to conduct house-to-house searches and seizures and quarantines. Every bit of it. That came about also as a result of the Spanish flu. Now, what happened is all of this kind of culminated with all these new laws, all this new stuff, and the United States powers over its own people exploded. Policing, courts, legislation, period. It changed the ability that the government had to stay out of your personal business and don't you step on my land. It changed it. It changed everything. Under, which is, basically unconstitutional power, under the guise of a national health emergency. That is really what began the health emergency. When this happened, if you were to look at it from an administrative surveillance standpoint, at that time, yes, people are dying, but we got to worry about the kids. It is what began both school and workplace absentee tracking. Yeah, you used to have workplace absentee tracking because that's how they tried to figure out if people were having diseases. It's also the thing that not only forced health reporting, it forced hospital reporting. You could be labeled with a placard, don't go around you, don't go this place, whatever. It gave incredible control. It gave incredible local ordinances, which brought down what we have as Emergency Measures Acts. And in that, it changed everything about American and American censorship, period. Okay? Now, just before the Spanish flu, something else was also being ruminated. Ruminating is how a cow just kind of chews on its cud, ruminate. Basically, only from a research standpoint, just a research standpoint. We had this thing began a few years before the explosion of the pandemic that was called the Food and Drug Administration. And it basically accelerated research into medicine. It led to a thing that was basically called the Flexner Report, right? Funded by the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching. And it is what began, they were already beginning this thing called a doctor. See, that's not how you had medicine before. It was all people locally. It was all passed down traditional medicine. We had traditional medicines that dealt with everything. It didn't matter what it was. We had traditional medicines all across the board dealing with everything. But the government's trying to say, no, this is real medicine. And the government basically kind of created this thing that became standardized, as you know, as a doctor, and it's got to have lab standards, and it's got to have a university affiliation, and it's got to conduct lab science, and we've got to have these things as a teaching hospital. And if you go to a teaching hospital, then you can't really do this. Just prior, I'm talking mere months, just prior to the Spanish flu somehow coming out of this military base in the center of the United States of America, something very interesting was happening. Well, that was when the Rockefeller Foundation institutionalized the Welsh Roast vision of all of this, that it's got to be a profession and it's got to be controlled. And they supported, we've got to have a big institution for doing this. And that was what became Johns Hopkins University. And then boom, we're talking in months. Boom, Spanish flu hits. Kind of interesting, isn't it? And as Spanish flu hits and America's in a panic, and traditional medicines were working. And the way you know traditional medicines were working, the high morbidity rates were in the mass concentrated cities. Not the farms, not the rural areas. It was all in mass concentrated cities where you have people, whatever. And all of a sudden what began, it's got to be biomedical, lab-based medicine, and it can't be home concoctions. And therefore they used, and that you saw it, I showed it to you, they used, even in the retelling of the story, this that all these bamboozled concoctions came back out, right? And this is where it began, that you got to go traditional medicine. You can't support naturopathy. You can't support national health remedies. A lot of the universities taught it. People don't even understand that. They cut those courses of study, those books of publishing completely out of the system. And if you didn't do it, you didn't get funding and you got decredited. Did you know that? all of the places across the United States that were taking hundreds and hundreds of years, thousands of years of ancient medicine, ancient practices, ancient teaching, in this same span of a window, basically delegitimized natural health. And all of a sudden, we get this interesting thing. They were working on it. They were testing it. They had been around. But the thing that exploded was two things: vaccine and pharmacological manufacturing, institutionalized medicine. Now, that ought to sound very, very, very familiar to you. This is our history. Our grandparents, great-grandparents and stuff lived through this. You saw everything that made it work, that we worked on our own. We had our own immunology. We were healthy, etc. Everything turned to doctors and drugs. Major wealth transfers too small. You don't get to play if you don't do this. You're not licensed. You don't have an ID. You got to get an ID. And what they did is they marginalized the people, like in Appalachia. They marginalized the people, said, screw you, I'm not getting an ID. You're not coming to my land. I'm still going to shoot your ass. And that's where you get a lot of the outlaw history. That's where you get people telling this story that these are dumbasses, they're interbred retards, like my family. That's where that comes from. Was that the truth? No. You had thriving, healthy families. Yeah, you could have pockets of people interbreeding with each other. You know, it's not that bad. When you get a divorce, she's still your sister, but you understand what I'm saying. Everything changed. Everything changed. Now, here is the true topic. What if what we've been going through is actually a complete repeating of this process? What if that was it? See, what if things like, I'll give you an example. What if things like the release of the Epstein files? Now, I want you to keep one thing in mind. There's new wealth. There is American wealth of great entrepreneurs. There is internet wealth. But one thing there has always been is old controlling wealth. There's classes in wealth. Old controlling wealth. What if part of all of this Epstein crap we're going through, that we're told is leaked to expose the truth? What if it is intentionally intertwining, etc., to destroy collective credibility of the relatively new wealth? We're talking big wealth, but relatively new. We're not talking old world wealth. We're not talking the old Illuminati type set you completely think of. But what if what we're really seeing is a game plan to change control, to change power control? Think about this. In the millions and millions of pages, right? And we see things like Prince Andrew and Bill Gates or whatever, and they did their dirty deeds. Prince Andrew got arrested. They'll do it. But what if that is about trying to destroy super high level people that are not old wealth? Prince Andrew's a little different. Not really destroying old wealth, but destroying political wealth, influence wealth, tech wealth, etc. What if a lot of this, and I'm using Epstein as the example, is not about justice? What if it's strategy? What if it's strategy, a long played strategy? Let me ask you a question. If Epstein died in 2019, and here we are in 2026, why is it just being released? What changed? Because it's the antithesis of transparency and truth, isn't it? We should have got them then. What changed in 7 years? Why now? Why now? And so what if all of this is not random, but it's actually calculated strategy? Now you understand where I'm headed with this. What if it's not random? What if it's actually calculated strategy? And then we kind of look back. Quick question. Do you think the power structure that put Epstein and Kamala, or Epstein, put Biden and Kamala in, knew he was a fucking idiot? Put it in chat. Do you think the Biden Kamala mix being inserted in power, same like Zelensky, he's just a puppet, Macron has the same problem as Zelensky. Zelensky was a known homophobic dweeb, same with Macron, but they inserted their people in power. We know that Biden and Kamala are idiots by design. Idiots by design. Now, what if back then they misunderstood Trump? He's just a freaking reality TV guy. He only cares about the money. So what they saw was a guy who needs press and a guy who likes a lot of money, which to me would equate to them, we can control this guy. See, the other guys are central casting. A lot of these stupid idiots you see on TV, Maxine Waters, central freaking casting, chose like reality TV to portray a certain image and totally control. And so they actually took Trump as a joke, which we've heard before, that they just thought Trump was a joke. But now let's look at some of the things going on. Trump ended up not being a joke. They accelerate their plans, etc. But what did we get at the same time? We got the bullshit, probably totally fake Ukraine war, a lot of money going out. Why do you need a lot of money out? I'm going to weather the crash. Why do we see not billion-dollar, $50 billion deals that we got to put in place to fund something, and now they're all in the trillions? See, I wanted you to understand the system could weather it out to starve us out. We used to bitch about a $50 billion appropriation. Now everything's $1 trillion no matter what. What if that's the buildup of the weather out? And if you play the game, they're going to make sure you have money to ride it out. And that's why AOC, cute, great Hooters, dumber than a stump, $20,000 a year, a bartender is worth $40 million. You understand what I'm saying? Play the game. We'll reward you a little bit. We're not going to take you up here. But how did this all kind of come about at the same time? And the Middle East exploded, Russia, Ukraine exploded, Middle East exploded, and fucking China and Taiwan. All at the same time. How did they sneak a lot of money out of the system before? Wars. What was the one dependable thing where the big guys could draw a lot of shit money out? War. Start a war. What did Trump not do? End wars. See, I think they thought Trump was just about money and ego. And they found out the hard way he's a fucking patriot. And then all hell broke loose. But if you look at what happened with him and what in sync with him, do you think that is all by coinkydink? I don't. When I start looking at this, what am I seeing? What is this going? What am I seeing? And traditionally, you can't keep on crashing the economy. You got to let people make money. You got to raise a new class. They got to multiply their money. They got to get stable, and then you take it. Well, how did they extract it from the government? Wars. Now think about this in terms of World War III. Is that what we're seeing? Is that what really the old money is trying to do, to erase all the progress mankind had made till they get back to the few closely held 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 families, doesn't matter, pick your number. And so what if we're watching smart people with money, big high money, that are smart, know what's going on, can see this against the old world evil, true evil old world that's willing to kill people. And we're watching this power struggle between elites, old world, legacy elites, etc. What if that's about it? What if this is all about, just on the other side, what if this is about eliminating the old world tie? What if this is all about power transition disguised as justice? How do we even have Gates and Epstein information? If he died in 2019 and stuff, photos of them together on the plane or on Epstein's island, if there weren't leaks. I just want you to think about that one thing. We knew a lot of this. We saw these photos. But you got to understand, those photos came from somewhere. What if those are timed leaks? Whether you like it or not, they're leaks. If you're in that circle and you're doing that crap, your security is through the roof. If you're in the mix of it, you ain't talking about it. So how did we even get that shit? How did we even get Prince Andrew involved in N? You follow what I'm saying? And the ladies that came out against Epstein were recruited by law firms. Yes, they had their history, but the law firms knew who they were, recruited them, and said, let's do this. You'll get money. Otherwise, you want to forget it because you think you're dead. I just want you to think about that for a minute. Where do those come from? Did we have some lone little girl saying Prince Andrew's bebopping me and they're humping me 1,000 times a day? And that's not how it happened. Somebody knew who these girls were. They convinced a few to talk out. They tested the water, see how it would go. And then we kept on progressively getting leaks. So let's look at this pattern. We had the Spanish flu. It completely reshaped the global economy. We had COVID, and it completely reshapes the global economy. The war in the Ukraine is responsible for breaking our energy systems in a massive way. Inflation during all this Biden time destroyed almost everybody's finances and savings. Destroyed property values that allowed the BlackRocks, Venrocks, Vanguards to come in and start buying up homes en masse that they'll rent back to you. They got them cheap to keep you from defaulting, but that got created. What if the Epstein and the no lawsuits going through and all this shit, no prosecution, is designed just to destroy the institutions. Because I can tell you, I don't fucking trust doctors anymore. Not when they got a $35,000 commission if they give you the jab, especially if you ever went to see your doctor and your doctor tries to give it to you 4 or 5 times till you say, you fucking tell me again about this vaccine, I'm walking out. But that was bought with money. So everybody lost trust. Trust in medical, trust in the system, trust in law. We're seeing no trust in police, no trust in border control. We're seeing no trust unanimously across the board. So here's the question. All of those crises, which are going on all at the same time, only benefit a new system. Gives me chills when I say it. When you look at it, every traditional system, whether you own land or not, trust the police, trust the military. I think Q was to get you to trust the military. You see this shit going on. Now you're not going to trust the military. Military is going to force everybody COVID shots. Now you're not going to trust the military. Think about that. The Q crap had you buy into President Trump was still president. The military is in control. You now know that's fucking stupid. Never happened. Even President Trump told me that's the stupidest thing in the world. You end up not trusting the military. We're questioning everything. So what if we're in this mix of the old system collapses, which is what's going on? Well, what happens when the systems collapse? What's going on right now? You want a new one. Everybody's begging for a new system. Everybody. You see the government bleeding us dry, and after all these years, we finally see how much is going out of USAID and how it was done. Finally, after all these years, you know how you plug those holes? Digital currency. You can track it all the way through, even at the government level. So is all of this designed to destroy what we know as the system? We'll call it the old system. For something brand new to come in its system that's more likely going to be digital currencies. It's definitely going to be social credit stores. It's going to be a lot more surveillance. And you're going to accept it. Why? All of those things you hate. What's the one thing that will make you accept it? Well, at least it's not being run by a bunch of fucking pedophile elites. At least it's not run by a bunch of satanic, fucked up, cannibalistic, child sacrificing, pedophile elites. What if we're being manipulated? And that's why I said this is only a what if exercise. All of these elements exist. The question we must ask, is it a few bad apples, 24 bad apples, a fucking crate or a cargo load of apples, or is it the whole system? What if we're being manipulated and they're using examples they created, they infected? It's like I told you earlier, it's smallpox. You carry that little sample of it, boom, you infect it, you wipe it out. What if all of this were plants into the system to make things break, to make every fucking thing look evil, unpatriotic, un-American, and whatever, but they're really, in scope, fairly isolated examples, but they've sold us it's everything. And finally, you get to the point, the system is so fucking evil, we need something new and good. What if it's about making everything, no matter what it is, look evil, so you will simply accept something else? Just so you'll simply accept something else. Is this the New World Order? I don't know. Epstein files aren't about justice. Justice would mean arrest. Fixing the elections is not about justice and the crap they're doing. They don't want people perp walked. They want to make it look like they're doing something, but they certainly want you to know it's broke. What if it's about destroying old rulers, the old money, starting World War III, just to reset everything and to build a new system from the ashes, which could, that's called problem, reaction, solution. Problem, reaction, solution. That's the cycle. Create a crisis, let people panic, offer the predetermined answer. What if we're not witnessing a scandal? What if we're truly witnessing a very planned demolition of an empire so a completely different empire can rise up? And we're cheering for it. We're cheering for it. Think about that. Maybe we're not really witnessing scandal the way I always told you, they fuck with our definitions. What if we're not really witnessing tyranny and scandals the way we identify them, but we're actually watching a planned destruction? So one empire, and how great we operate, and a grand plan can rise, and we're actually cheering it on. We're cheering it on. Think about how many evil people they're giving us. They'll give us the evil people. The Soroses to blame it on. The Jews. Think about how far that takes it back if you can begin to hate the Jews. If you can turn Christians on Jews. That's deep. And it all happened to fucking coincides with our 250-year anniversary as a nation. When I saw the pieces this way, I went, fuck. And maybe it is getting rid of the old world order. But we know what the new world order is. And we're not in control. And every one of those communist manifesto fucking things failed. The 45 list, every one of them came to fruition. And look at all that's culminating with the 250th anniversary of the birth of what made everything work in a greater way that was really about people. Something to think about. Something to think about. And I'm telling you, that is why we got to fight so hard for this evidence to show how bad it is. Share this program. I love you all.
Not fixing 2020 will damn our nation forever. The historic Maricopa County full forensic audit effort processed 20,895,610 digital and forensic images of varying formats, resulted in 208 million individual evidence-proof files. The system processed over 58 billion forensic measurements, resulting in over 2 trillion individual base computations. No hopium, no hype, just hardcore forensic evidence. Please make sure the Maricopa County Full Forensic Audit Archives survive. Donate now. So if you want what happened in the 2020 election fixed, then please donate to protect and secure this historic evidence.
Rennie Good was a gifted soul, a writer and a poet and a mother, wow. She tried to hit an agent with her car, oh no! Pop, motherfucker, now she's gone! Yeah, yeah, yeah! Being a fucking liberal is a mental disease. Blue-haired and fuckables with the septum ring. You are not a hero, you're a fucking disease! You fuck around and find you're gone.